Hello my friends, it's the Game Boy Geek here, and today you awake from cryogenic sleep in a strange biodome that resembles your home planet. You have no memory of how and why you're there. Your biodome is just one room from infinitely many rooms on a traveling alien spaceship, the Ark. You'll be opening and powering up rooms, exploiting resources needed to awake the rest of your faction. You'll be collecting alien artifacts and investigating the reason why your faction is at the Ark. Ark Awakening is a hybrid boost placement and area control game with exploration elements for 1 to 4 players with the standard game, adding a 5th player in the premium box. And it takes 30 minutes per player to play, and it's for ages 14 and up. It's published by Skyport Games. Today, we'll be doing a rule school where I'm going to teach you how to set up and play the game so that you don't have to read the rulebook yourself. Now, I've placed timestamps below me in the description of this video, just in case you want to jump to a specific section of the rules. Well, let's get started. Ark Awakening is a hybrid boost placement and area control game with engine building mechanics for 1 to 4 players or up to 5 players with the premium box, and your mission is to find out why your alien faction is on this Ark. And this is a secret mission, like sending advanced robotic technology to your planet, and you'll be fulfilling 3 objectives to make that happen. But to even see what your secret mission is, you'll need to complete other objectives like exploring a certain amount of rooms, or winning combat, or awakening more units from cryogenic sleep. You'll be taking actions on your own biodome, like healing wounded units, or awakening more from cryogenic sleep. Or maybe you'll be increasing your military arsenal for combat, or maybe routing power out to different rooms. And the more power that gets routed to a room, the more powerful the ability is, like being able to exploit more resources from certain rooms. You'll be moving around, exploring new rooms, possibly even teleporting to different rooms and transport gates. You'll also be using engineering to add integration to different rooms, possibly activating that room. That'll allow you to chain certain actions in some rooms, with others taking powerful turns, also possibly being one of the 3 objectives you need to do to finish your secret mission and win the game. Now, the setup of this game varies a lot depending on the player count. So here I'm showing you a setup for the 3-player game, and on pages 7 and 8 in the rulebook, it shows you all of the custom configurations for each of the different player counts that you'll need to look at, especially if you're playing with a player count that's different from 3 players. Now, I'll bring up those images here right at the end of this section to show you, you can pause it and see how to set up the board here. But essentially, there's different pieces around the edges that you'll use. There's these L pieces and there's these straight pieces. And again, using the diagram in the rulebook for your player count, you'll set those up in a square rectangle like this, but you'll also be setting up player boards depending on, again, the amount of players. Next, we're going to have you separate some of the room tiles. There are some called factories, and these are essentially the tiles that help you get the 4 different main resources in the game. And they look like this. They're colored, and they have the resource that they get you in the upper left. For example, the orange is the dilithium, the red is the osphite, the green is the biotics, and the blue is the titanium. You're also going to separate out all the transport gate tiles and the power generators. Now, there's 2 of these. There's one that's purple, one that's turquoise. Some of the player counts you'll only use 1 of these, and if so, it doesn't matter which one you'll be using, but separate all these out from all the other room tiles. Now, you'll end up taking one of those different factories and placing them in a specific spot depending on that player specific setup. And here, now from the picture of the 3-player, I actually have it sort of oriented and flipped so that I have the closest player board here, because it's going to be easier to read for the camera. But again, you're going to place those in specific spots, again, looking at the grid and seeing how they are laid out based upon those pictures, but you're randomly going to place the 4 factories in the different factory spots. And again, depending on the player count, you're going to place 1 or 2 power generators out and transport gates. So look at the specific picture on those pages, and I'll just show you those in just a moment. as well. When placing those power generators, in this case I used the turquoise one, again the violet and the turquoise, if you're only using one of them for your player count, use either one, but use the corresponding power generators, there's these cylinders here, put 2 of them on that specific tile. Again, if you're using violet as well in your player count, put the 2 violet ones on the violet power generator. Off to the side, stack all of the rest of the transport gates and make sure they look like this, make sure they're not face this way, it has the squares there. Make sure they look like this. Stack them all together and place them off to the side for now. Next, you're going to begin creating the room deck. Now, from the factory tiles that you have not already placed, you're going to take a certain amount of each of the 4 of those depending on the player count. I'm not going over the solo rules in this video. So if you're playing with 2 players, you'll take 1 of each of these. If you're playing with 3 or 4 players, you'll take 2 of each of them. And if you're playing the 5-player game from the premium box, you'll take 3 of each of those. Any factory tiles that you're not taking right now can be placed back in the box. Next, you're going to grab a certain amount of special rooms, and it's going to depend on the amount of players that you're playing with. Now, each of these special rooms have a sign. In the very bottom right, you'll notice this little sign, like here has 2 lines and a dot on the very bottom right, where this one has sort of an L-shaped with a dot. Each of the groups has 4 room tiles in them, so when you find the 4th tile of a group, you can stop searching the deck for any more of that group. Now, for up to 3 players, you're going to select 3 of these groups randomly. If you're playing with 4 or 5 players, you'll select 4 of these groups, and you're using all the tiles from each group, and the groups you're not using can be placed back in the box. Now, you can mix and match these with any randomization, but if you're playing with up to 3 players, meaning no more than 3, you cannot use these 2 groups together. And they look just like this. They have a dot with 2 lines here, and then they have sort of almost like a division symbol. You cannot use those 2 groups if you're playing with 3 or less players. Now, off to the side, you're going to find this tile that says bottom tile, and you're going to place it there. And then you're going to shuffle up all the tiles you selected from the special groups and the factory tiles for your player count. Shuffle them all together and put them face down. That's going to be your room stack. You'll then take 2 rooms off the stack and place them just above each of the player boards. Again, you're going to look at the setup picture for your player count to see where exactly you place them, but essentially they're going to be right above, just like this. So at this point, let's look at what this would look like in a different player count setup. So here in the 2-player setup, you can see the outer ring around it. You can see the 4 factories where they're randomly placed. By the way, when you're putting these factories, it doesn't matter which way they're oriented. I just have them facing the camera, but you can have them facing different players if you want. It has no change in the gameplay. You'll also see that there is a transport gate and 1 power generator. Plus, you can see the 2 random tiles on top of each of the player boards as well. Now here's what a 4-player game would look like at this point in setup. Again, looking at the outer ring, looking at the 4 player boards, how they're centered in the ring on each of the sides. And one thing to note here, of course, looking at where the factories are set up, again, those are always random, but the factories always go where the different factories are. And of course, in this 4 and the 5-player game, which I'll show you in just a moment, both outer power generators are used and there's no transport gate. And here's the recommended setup for the 5-player. I just mentioned about the special thing for the 5-player game. There are both outer power generators used and no transport gate, but also look here how the 5-player player boards are on that one side. On the bottom there, you see that there's 2 player boards. And again, you always see 2 of those randomized special room tiles above each of the player boards. But of course, where the factory tiles are and such and the power generators are specific to each player account. But remember, where you see the factory tiles, they could be any color. Those are randomized. Next, you'll find the achievement cards. Place them on their blue side up. They look like this. The other side that they're not supposed to be have all other colors, purple and reds in them. You want them to be just blue side up, all 6 of them. Put them off to the side, but where everyone can still see them. Next, locate the artifact cards that look like this. You're going to find certain cards, all the cards that say Alien's Pen and the ones that say Beginner's Help. Remove those from this deck. Place these off to the side for now. The rest of these cards you can shuffle and place off to the side. Next, you're going to find the mission cards that look like this. First, you're going to remove any of the cards that say First Mission on them. There is a tutorial way to play the game called First Mission. It's a variant of the game to help you learn the game without all of the mechanisms. So remove all of these. Then through that mission deck, you're going to look for the cards. On the bottom right have the symbols, and those correspond with the special groups of room tiles that you selected when you were selecting the room tiles for the game. Now what you're going to do is select cards where both symbols in the corner also match the symbols from the special room tiles that you selected earlier. If either of the two symbols on the card were not selected from the room tiles, you wouldn't use that card. There should be at least 4 of these cards in a 2 or 3 player game and at least 6 of them in a 4 or 5 player game. Once you have those, shuffle them up, put them face down and off to the side. That's going to be known as your mission deck. Now what you'll go through this deck and find are all the cards that have the special symbols for the special room groups that you declared at the beginning of this setup. There'll be 2 of each card for each of those special rooms, and you'll always use the 2 power generator cards that don't have a symbol but they say power generator. So all the cards that match your special room icons and the 2 power generator cards, you will take those out from this deck. The rest of those cards you don't need and can put back in the box. And all the cards that you are using, put off to the side, but leave them face up like this so everyone can see them splayed out. Next, you'll find a big bag of resources, and these are the different types of resources in the game. There'll be a big pile of each color. Just put them and separate them out by color off to the side where everyone can reach them. You'll also find the neutral game components that are the purple, black, and turquoise ones. We'll have power generators, which are cylinders, and we'll have these figures here. There's many of each of these. I'm just showing you one of each, but you can put those in a supply off to the side as well. Next, you're going to find the Explore tokens. They look like this. These are face down. Make sure they're all face down, shuffle them up, and then put them in some stacks. Put them off to the side for now. You'll put one face down on every one of what's known as the outer rooms. And these are all the rooms that you've set up out on the board, even the ones that are just above the player boards, that's okay. You put them on everything that basically put them out there, but you don't put them on any of the player boards themselves. Now speaking of those player boards, everyone's board should be on side A in the bottom left. If it's not, put it there now. After you've played 3 or 4 games, you can flip this to side B, and it gives all the players an asymmetric way to play. Each player gets all components of their color, which are units, cylinders, and cubes. Now, remember earlier we set aside Aliens pen cards. You'll give 1 to each player, and then if you have additional ones, just put them back in the box because you only just need 1 for each player. Now these artifact cards are essentially, they're secret cards. You can look at them, but don't show them to your friends. Now everyone knows you have an Aliens pen card, so you keep this, but once you start getting these, you'll put them either face down in front of you or keep them in your hand. Now from your private components, you're gonna place 2 units on your unit stasis and sickbay. You're going to take 2 of your power cylinders and put them right on your power generator. You're going to place your military arsenal marker, put it at 0. You're also going to take your pawn, which is your player marker. You'll just put it off to the side for now. Every player is also going to take 2 metamorphite resources. These are the black ones. These are essentially wild resources. All the rest of your components are part of your private supply. You can just leave them in your bag next to you, or you can put them next to you as well outside of the bag. But these are your private components. You'll give each player a player aid. This is actually the back side of this, and it has all sorts of icons that will help you out with certain actions and certain effects throughout the game. And here's the front side. Now this has to do with a specific faction that you've taken, but this only really matters if you're playing the advanced game, which is allowing you to have an asymmetry to your specific faction, which we don't recommend until you've played this at least 3 or 4 times. The object of the game is to be the first person to complete your mission. But in order to obtain your secret mission, you first need to complete 2 achievements, like controlling a certain amount of rooms, or winning battles, or exploring a certain amount of rooms. Once you've done any 2 of these, you're able to get your secret mission. Now, these mission cards, you'll have to do all 3 things on them. Like this says secure a prisoner. You need to arm the prisoner's escort using advanced weaponry from the armory, or go in the launch bay to take the arrived prisoner, or escort it to the brig. Now, these essentially correspond with certain rooms that you'll find, and you need to be able to activate those 3 rooms in order to win the game. Now, as you saw in setup, certain rooms start in play, but over the course of the game, you'll be drawing from a room deck and constructing the board as you play. So let's focus in on one room and talk about a couple of very important concepts up front. Now let's first talk about room benefits. In the upper left-hand corner of room tiles, you'll see benefits. I'm not going to go over those benefits in detail now as I cover these throughout the video, but the important thing to know is that in the upper left is a benefit. Now, you can gain more power of that benefit depending on the room tile. Meaning the first visible modifier of that benefit is shown here. Like here we see a 1, here we see a 0. Now as you see, in some rooms, the power that you gain from that benefit is going to increase as power cylinders are placed into these circle placeholders. Where on other rooms, the power of that benefit is going to increase as you place integration cubes on square placeholders. So even right now, the benefit here would be 3, and here it would be 4. And notice that it doesn't matter which player or players are on there, the benefit still stacks. So even though there's 2 players here, it's still 4. Now we're going to cover later how you place these cylinders and cubes. Now who gets to gain these benefits? To answer that question, I'd like to cover a very important concept in the game, control of a room. Throughout the game, players will be placing components to take control of a room. Placing cylinders or units will give you control of the room, but also to every other player that has cylinders and units. So in this example, the green, red, and player will control the room and get the benefit here, which is 8 of this benefit. So in summary, everyone gets control that has a game piece there, until one of the players places an integration cube here. Now in this case, green has exclusive control. Even if this unit was not here, because they have an integration cube here, no one else does, they have exclusive control. So even yellow and red has cylinders here, they no longer control this room, only green does. However, if red now adds a cube, both red and green have control, yellow does not, because they are tied with 1 integration cube each. However, if green places another cube, they have 2, red has 1, green is the only one with exclusive control of this room. But if all 3 of them had a single cube, they're all tied now for control of the room, so they all inclusively control it. Players will be taking turns in clockwise order, and on your turn, normally you're going to take 1 action phase, and in that action phase you're going to select an action. Now there's many different actions you can take, so let's go over the different actions. After you're finished with your action phase, it's going to be the next player's turn clockwise. At the beginning of the game, your action pawn is off to the side, and you can place it on one of 7 spots and take the action that is known as your biodome. So for example, if we go here, this is mobility control. Now when you go to a spot, you'll select 1 horizontal line and you'll do the actions in that spot, and you can do them in any order. So in this case, there's 2 different actions I could take here, and I could take these in any order. So let's talk about this. This is just simply moving. Now that lets you move any number of your units to an adjacent room. Now by default, we look all the way to the left, and this shows you the power of this action, 2. So we have 2 movement actions, if you will. So for example, let's say we wanted to move these guys here. Now I can move them all, or any amount of these, 1 adjacent spot for 1 movement. So I could move them both like this, because this is our biodome, but it's directly connected to some of these outer rooms. Now notice that we move to an outer room. Other players might end up being in these outer rooms, but players can never go on other players' biodomes. Now you'll notice on those outer rooms are exploration tokens that are triangles. Normally when you move to a room with one, you'll explore, but I'll cover this later in the video. Now let's say for my second movement, I only wanted to move this unit over to here, because for 1 movement, you can move any number of units from a single room to an adjacent room. Now in this case, we've used both of our moves, so we're done with that. Now we could use teleport if we have that ability. Now on our player board here, we don't have that ability, so we'd have to get that from outer rooms, like this one on tiles that we control, but I'll cover that action in detail later in this video. Now after you take your action where you placed your pawn and you did all the possible actions in a single horizontal line there, it's going to go to the next. That's going to be the end of your action phase, and most of the time you only get 1 action phase on your turn. There's certain things that can help break that rule where you can have multiple action phases on a turn, but most of the time it's going to go to the next player. Now when it comes back to us, you must pick one of the other actions. You can't pick the same one. So let's say we go and pick this one. Now let's say we did that, it comes back to our turn around, everyone else taking a turn, and we go here. Again, when you pick an action, you're going to go look at the control you have for that. So let's go over what some of these other actions are. You can route power by going to your power generator. Now we have 2 cylinders here that we start with. Now by default, what this says is it has a maximum of 2, and we can use 1 of them at the beginning of the game from here. Now when you place a power cylinder, you can place it in any room. You don't have to be in it or next to it or anything. So we could, and essentially, put it like this. Now remember, we now have a piece here, which means we inclusively control this room. So in this case, we would actually need to do an exploration, but I'm not going to go over that again. Now, if you remember, there was a power generator out here using sort of some of the neutral components. And again, by default, there's 2 there, and you can use one of them. I control this room because I have a unit there. So when I took that route power action, I could also, and additionally, take one from here because I control it. And I didn't have to take from this room, as you can move and route any turquoise power cylinder, even ones previously moved by other players when they controlled that room. And I can place it again in any room, but let's say we also still place it here, for example. Now let's talk about these cylinders for just a moment. They always are placed top to bottom. As you can see, the second one goes there. However, if for any reason one were to get removed, all the ones from bottom would slide up. You can never place your power cylinders in somebody else's biodome, and players cannot take or destroy or block you from moving them into a free room. However, if the room is full of cylinders and you occupy the room, at that point you can remove one of your opponent's cylinders and place yours in there. However, for now, let's just say it was our original example like this. Now, on a future turn, let's say we wanted to take the production and exploration. Now remember, whenever you go to a spot, you take all the actions in a specific horizontal line in any order and splitting them up as you see fit. Here, there's actually 2 horizontal lines, so I have to select either production or exploitation. So again, if you want to do this, you could take either the produce, and in this case, we would look here, which is the same icon, and in this case, we would get one of the wild black resources, or we could exploitation. And if we did that, then we could exploit here the factory. That's why it's a picture of the factory. You can exploit from up to any 4 factories that you control. In this case, because we just routed power to this, and we now currently own this still, that power generator out there, that's the turquoise one, we now would be able to get 4 of these green biotic resources. But however, if someone else then controlled the power generator out in the middle that I showed you that was turquoise, they might route this somewhere else, and then if that's the case, they route somewhere else, then if I exploit here, I only get 2. So whoever owns that outer power generator gets to decide if they route it, where, they keep that there or they route it somewhere else. And you can move the ones you have in outer rooms, even if you have some in your power generator biodome section. And likewise, if I took the routing power action, again, normally you're taking them from here, but if there aren't any there, you can take them from other rooms. Again, that's when things would sort of slide up. Now let's talk about the engineering action. If you go there, you're able to place integration cubes. And in this case, we have the default strength of 2. Now to do that, the room must be occupied by at least one of your units and unoccupied by any other player's units. So if they had another player here like this, I could not put an integration cube here. Even if we have a yellow cylinder here, and let's say this one, the power generator that this came from, is owned by green. We all inclusively control this, but I have a unit, they don't, we can do it. So, and in this case, we replace integration cube here. It always goes left to right. Now, I exclusively control this as talked about before. If you could place 2 cubes per action phase, you cannot place more than 1 in the same room. Meaning if I placed one here as I just showed, I couldn't place another integration cube in the same room until the next action phase. Now, if you do not have any free square placeholders, then and only then, you may remove any one of the opponent's cubes, returning it to them, and placing your own on there. And this is very important as it's a way for players to activate a room, even though it was activated before by another player. And we're going to talk about activating rooms in just a little bit. Now, this one didn't have any cost. However, let's say I was here and I wanted to spend an action to put an integration cube here. This does have a cost. I'd have to spend 5 of those resources in addition to the engineering action to place one of my integration cubes right there, and then I'd have exclusive control of that room. Also keep in mind that you can place integration cubes on your board by paying the same thing. This is 2 of either of these 2 resources. You can't pay 1 and 1. Whenever you see something like this, you have to pay all of this or all of that based on that number. But this is going to help you. So now if I go here, I can have up to 4 strength for move, for example. You could do that for any of these as I just showed. And you don't need a unit in your biodome to place a cube there. Now let's say you went here and you want to take the artifact research action. Here's going to allow you to either gain or play artifact cards. And again, showing you either your drawing cards or playing cards. Now if you play one, you're going to play 1, but if you draw them, right now we draw 2 and keep 2. But if we had a cube here, we draw 4 and keep 2. Now if you took that action again on a future turn and you played this card, you'd get this, which essentially is this. It's converting 3 resources from one type into 2 of the wild resources. Then you would discard this. Now you have a hand limit of 15 cards, and if the draw pile for this ever extends or it gets used up, you would shuffle the discard pile and create a new one. There's other uses of these cards in combat, which I'll cover later. Now, if you take the military deployment action, you can increase your military arsenal. By default, it's going to go up 2. However, let's say you had 3 integration on cubes on here, and you got 8, and then there was another building here that gave you that action, and you have 5. So by taking that action now, you're able to move up to move it ahead 13. If we had 0, we'd now be at 13, for example. Now, this is going to help you in combat, so let's talk about that. Now, you can move through rooms with other players and combat doesn't happen, but if after your action phase, the active player's units occupy the same room of opponents, then the combat phase starts. And the attacking player is the active player that initiates combat by moving and ending their movement in a room with other players' units. So even if other players are together, it doesn't matter. Only if the active player at the end of their action phase is in the room with other opponents like this. Now then you're going to look at the defensive player's defense. Now it's on their board. This is my board here, but you look at the green player's board, and by default everyone has 2 defense per unit. So they have 2 units, and by default they have 2 defense for each of those, so they have a total of 4. But keep in mind, other rooms might give you defense per unit or just straight up defense if you control that room. So let's say green had just those 2 units in the rooms, they have a 4 defense. Let's say my arsenal was 3. I have less than the opponent's defense, which was 4. At that point, the attacker would have lost and you'd resolve the combat like this. You'd take the one that was defeated and you'd lay it face down like that in its sick bay. They are now considered wounded. Now keep in mind, over the course of the game, you might be able to get some neutral units. And if they were part of the combat and then got hurt, they're going to go wounded and go back to where they came from. However, if the attacking player has military arsenal more or equal to the defender's defending strength, then you continue in the combat, where both players will simultaneously choose to play 1 artifact card from their hand. And it shows you here, this is a combat of 6. I'd add 6 to my 4. I have a total of 10. You would do that with the other player. That's your total combat strength. So I have a total combat strength of 10, essentially 6 plus 4, and you would do the same for the other player. And the one with the total higher combat strength is the winner. And if it's equal, the defender is the victor. Then you would discard this card to the discard pile. However, you might know that some of the cards have this icon in the combat power. That's critical mass. And if both players play an artifact card with that sign, due to the combined power of both artifacts, there's a critical mass explosion in that room, and both players lose and are considered defeated and follow what I showed you earlier about being defeated. However, if you're the victorious player, and only if you were the attacking player, you reduce your military arsenal by the defender's defensive strength. So let's say their defensive strength was at 4, it would end up going down to 4. You can never go back below 0. And keep in mind that a victorious defending player never reduces their military arsenal. So now we know how units get wounded. Let's talk about bringing them back. Now, wounded units can't perform any actions, and they're essentially they can't even control a room. They can't do anything. So here we're here, and if we take this action, again, we get to do both of these because they're in the same horizontal line, and this shows you the different things you could do and the cost of them. So heal, we would spend 1 of these resources and we would stand them up. Or we could spend 5 of either of these 2 resources, again, never mixing them, 5 of this or 5 of this, and we can essentially get a new unit. That's essentially awaking a unit from a cryogenic sleep, and it comes in standing up in this spot. Now what this teleport ability allows you to do is move any number of your units from one single room, either back to your biodome, into any room, or to a transport gate. So because I control this, I can use that ability, and right now I control this at a power of 1. So let's say I wanted to move this one to a transport gate. Now remember, I could use this one, even though I would no longer control this. Again, we checked it at the beginning of the turn, but let's say we moved this one. All right, well this one's gonna teleport right to the transport gate, which is cool because now you're adjacent to another room, a power generator, plus you could start exploring out, and we'll talk about exploring in just a moment, but now you're sort of in the middle and you're able to build around that. Now again, if we use the teleportation as the first part of that action we haven't moved yet, we could now move from there to there, for example, because that would be adjacent. Now, all these transport gates are considered adjacent to any other transport gates. So if you're at one, for just a normal move action, you can move from, again, one transport gate to any other one on the board. Now, anytime you put a piece on a specific room tile that has the exploration on there, you must explore. It's mandatory. So for example, even on the previous turn when I was showing you moving in and such, there you would have need to have explored and done what I showed you here, but I want to talk more about control there at that time. So remember, anytime you put a game piece, which is a unit or a cube or a cylinder. If you place any one of those on a room that has an exploration token, it's mandatory and a free action that you must explore. So first you'll flip this over and you'll gain its benefit. These have all sorts of benefits, like that is a wild resource, so you'll take the black resource. Now, all of those abilities on the back of there are on the back of your player aid. Then you're gonna take a room from the top of the room stack, which is face down. You're gonna flip it up and you're gonna place it adjacent. Now, adjacent in this game is always orthogonal. It's never diagonal to the tile that you just explored. Then you're gonna take a blank, from the stacks of explore tokens that you haven't used yet, and you're gonna place it on that room. However, there is one exception. If before exploring this, somebody had already explored this one and placed this tile there, we were here and we explored, you could not explore and place a tile in a spot that would create a 2x2 grid like this. So you could not do this. In this case, we would need to place this tile either over here or up there. Now you might move to somewhere, explore, and then use another movement, explore, and keep going around. You can keep doing things like that. And again, after you finish your action phase is over, and most of the time it's going to go to the next player. If you're exploring and placing a transport gate, you can never have fewer than 4 rooms in between any 2 transport gates. Now at some point you may be placing the last room tile. You'll place that out there as normal, and then the bottom tile will tell you to place transport gates. Now you've set aside some transport gates at the beginning of the game. Now starting with that last explorer, which was the one that placed that last tile, is going to start placing transport gates. One player at a time, each one places one of them. Now when they place them, like here would be a legal placement, but you could not place them in any 2x2 grid as mentioned previously, and you can't place them if they're within 4 tiles of another transport gate as spoken about before as well. So after a player has placed one, you then go to the next player clockwise and you'll continue placing one until there's no legal placement ways to place any more transport gates. And then play resumes normally, starting with the player next to or clockwise of that last explorer that brought the last tile out that triggered this part of the game. Now remember, what you're trying to do to win is complete your secret mission, but to get a secret mission you have to complete at least 2 of these achievements. So let's say I've just explored my 10th room, meaning I have the 10th one of these in front of me and I've collected after I've done what it said. Now I put my cube here to show me that I've done that, and more than one player can do the same thing, like this player could have done this earlier or after, it's okay. Now, let's say I just completed my second one of these. You will then get a secret mission card, and you need to find these rooms and activate them. So for example, let's look at this icon right here. Now remember, when taking the engineering action, if you have a unit in this room, you can take that action and you can place, in this case would be the final cube here, we'd have to pay these resources, but this room is now known as fully integrated because all of the square placeholders have cubes in them. Now we control this room because we have more cubes than this player here, and because it's our turn, it's still the action phase here, we can now activate this room because it's fully integrated and we control it. And by doing so, we're gonna be able to get the target card that has this icon on it, but let me show you a couple other examples. Let's say yellow had 2 cubes and I just placed this one right now. I would not be able to activate this room because I don't control it. So it's fully integrated, but I don't control it, so I couldn't activate it. Yellow on their turn would be able to activate it because it'd be their turn in their action phase. It's fully integrated and they control that room. And activating a room is a free action. You don't have to do anything in order to take that. But as I showed you earlier, if there's no square placeholders left, it's red's turn, they could take the engineering action, remove one of these, giving it back to the opponent, and placing one of their own cubes there. It's now fully integrated, and this player controls it, and it's in the middle of their action phase, so they'll be able to activate that room. Now, not only does this card show me that I fulfilled one of the 3 that I need to do for my secret mission to win the game, but it also allows you to chain actions. So if I go here, notice this icon is here, and I do one of these 2 actions that I showed you earlier, it then can chain to the one to the right. You always go left to right. So then I could also do this. Now you keep this here, so you have to move this next turn, but we now get to do this action, which is the route power action. You can chain these. Now you could do this before the end of the game, but anytime you integrate one card, one room fully, you get to take that card there. Now, you can do this on ones that aren't part of your special missions. You can do that because you want the chain, or you can do that because you want to bluff and show people what you're trying to go for, but you can use this chain action. It's very powerful. Also keep in mind that you can only chain once during your turn, and if you have multiple chains, you have to choose which one to use at all. You can't chain multiple chains. But once you complete all 3 objectives on that mission card, you declare the game win and the game ends immediately. You then read that text out loud on your mission card and point to the activated rooms and showing your target cards that you've done it. Now you can only declare the game win during your turn, and you can complete the objectives in any order. And you might even be able to do all 3 in the same turn. Because by the time you draw your mission card, it might happen that you already have completed 1 or more of its objectives. Now this should be able to allow you to dive into your first game. Remember at the back of the player, it has a lot of information on icons, some of them that I did not cover here, but they're all right here, as well as a full appendix with an FAQ and game advice. It's a separate leaflet in the box that you can read and go through and find answers to certain things. Well, I hope this helped you dive right into Ark Awakening faster than you normally would if you had to read the rulebook yourself. Now, if you have further questions about the rules, I've placed a link below me in the description of this video, and that's the best place to ask them since I'll be notified, but so will also Skyboard Games.